Thank you for joining us for 30 minutes today for an intentional conversation on racism in Canada. This is one conversation of a three-part series. In the other two, we have talked about racism on a society and then also in the professional setting. Today we'll focus more on where do we go from here. And of course, today we also have Dr. Nana Owusu.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Thank you for joining. Okay, is healing possible?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I think it is possible, but it's something that I think it's individual. It's on an individual basis. I think the challenge is, like we talked about before, for some people that process of healing is going to be a little bit more difficult if you become a bit more jaded or a little bit more hardened by some of your experiences. And I can totally appreciate why. I know people who are not looking to heal. They're upset, they're unhappy, they're angry, and that's it. I think that though healing as a society, I would like to believe that it's possible. With the number of events that continue to happen, that continue to be swept under the rug, it makes it seem more and more daunting each time. I would have thought that by now, by 2020, that we'd be there by now. And that was naive. I was young to think that by the year 2020 we'd be there, but I really did. And even with events that have even happened to me in these last weeks, it just feels like we're still not there. But I guess the positive is that there's a lot more awareness, and I think awareness. I don't have all the answers. I don't know all of what it's going to take for us, but I do believe that awareness is a big part of it. I think that this is something that we have to do together. So yes, I guess in short, to answer your question, I'd say yes, I think so, but I think it's going to take a lot more time and a lot more effort from a lot of people on sides.
How do we turn this into something positive other than the awareness that you talked about?
Well, I think just continued conversation. Like I think about my experiences personally, and I think all I've ever been looking for is people to acknowledge that yes, it does happen, and yes, it does suck, as opposed to the narratives that tend to come about. There are these it's become very political, and I don't like, in my mind. Yes, there are people who may have beliefs or feelings that are racist, but I don't necessarily think that that is all based on politics. I think that is just ingrained in our society. And so I think that what I personally have always been looking for is when I do share a story or an experience with a friend or whoever, I don't need a hug every time, but what I don't want is, oh, well, that probably wasn't because of you're Black, or that probably wasn't because they were thinking this. There's just this doubt that comes in, and or if I see something and I share a video or a story or something that I've seen on the internet, I get a lot of, well, we didn't see the whole video, so we don't know. Maybe this person really deserved it, or So I guess to answer your question, what I'm really looking for is just acknowledgement that we have a problem. I don't think you can fix a problem if we're not willing to acknowledge that it exists, right? So I guess going back to what I was saying earlier, that's why awareness, I think, is everything. You have to be willing to acknowledge that it's there, and you have to be aware of it when it's happening around you, even if it's not happening to you. And I think that with enough people being aware and willing to say, hey, there is a problem, and you know what, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm willing to stand up when I do see something that doesn't sound right or doesn't look right. I think that's what's necessary.
Is there an instance where you were in a racial situation and then you were able to turn it into like a educational moment, or turn it into like a opportunity instead?
Yeah, there have been many. I think that those often happen in those situations that people assume were harmless. We talked before about microaggressions, and I think, like, boy, I can think of so many situations. People. Okay, so perfect example. When I was younger, I mentioned before, I didn't always speak out, but there did come a time when I got fed up. I used to pride myself on my hair, and so I always had whatever different styles I had a big high top fade. I had steps. I had all sorts of things, and it used to take me forever to get it all, set up the
Mm-hmm.
way I wanted it to look. And it would drive me insane when I would walk around, school or wherever, and somebody would grab it and they just, oh, I have to touch it. It just feels like it's so cool. I need to touch this. And at first it used to just make me upset, and I thought I should snap out of this. It's no big deal. It's just hair. And then I thought, well, no, there's no way I could walk up to random people and just touch them. That doesn't make any sense. So I need to take this opportunity to explain. These may be friends, these may be loose acquaintances, but I need to take this opportunity to make people understand. So, um, inappropriate as it may have been, whenever somebody would do that, which was probably every day, I'd say, I know, right? And I would grab their hair and I would mess it up. And and I was always met with, whoa, what are you doing? Why you can't just do that to. I said, yeah, exactly. I can't just mess up your hair. It's your body. I shouldn't be touching you, and I don't want to be touched either. And it was, you could see the light bulb go on, or they'd be like, oh, okay, I didn't mean anything by it. And I've had this conversation with people before, and they'll say, well, that's not racism. That's just more poor awareness. I, call it what you want. I think that at the end of the day, if it's only happening to a select group of people who are different, then remove the label. It's inappropriate interaction with somebody who is of a different background because they are different.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. At the end of the
I think
day.
at the end of the day, that's pretty well synonymous with racism, but that word has become so harsh in its use that I think that triggers a lot of people. Sorry.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
Right. Right.
So
We also, in the other conversation, we talked about you have built up an armor, and then that sounds to me is kind of like survival mode at that moment, or you're doing everything you can so you don't get in trouble. But on the personal level, it must have affected you. How do you cope with that on the personal level, in your mental space? How do you not let it get to you?
yeah, that's really difficult. I guess that's part of that armor is learning how to and this is probably not an appropriate way to handle things, but how to squash it. How to internalize it, hold it together, and not act out as a result. And like I said, I wouldn't blame people who did act out. Who I'm not one. I don't advocate violence, but I do also believe that somebody can only be pushed so far before they're going to react. And that reaction, again, I don't mean to say that that has to be a violent response, but I think that sometimes it's going to be a harsh response, and maybe a response that is harsher than people would want to receive. And so for me, I've always been a thinker. I've always been one who I try my best not to react in any situation. I try to take a step back and think for a moment. What, maybe outside of playing sports might be a different scenario, but beyond that, I try to just think my way through situations and think, okay, what can I do to navigate this so I don't end up in trouble, this person doesn't end up in trouble, we're not in a situation that we don't need to be in or don't want to be in. And maybe I shouldn't have to do that, but that's just something that I've done. So to manage it and to cope with it, it's, in the past, I always just kept it to myself. I shared stories here and there, but like I said, whether intentional or not, I think that some of the people who I would speak to, well-intentioned, good friends, couldn't relate. If they weren't living it, they couldn't relate. So I had to try my best to find other avenues and other outlets. And for me, that was generally sports. I would not talk about it, but I would push my energy into something else. In recent times, there is a group of 3 or 4 people who I know quite well, all Black fathers, couple in Canada, one in the United States, and we have made it a point to have a discussion or a chat once a week. Once just on a weekend. It's late at night. Our families are all sleeping. We're exhausted the next day when we go to work, but it's worth it. I never would have thought that it was something that I needed. It wasn't until we did it for a first time that I recognized how much I did need it. Just an opportunity to express whatever feelings we were all having about different situations, whether it was, Amy Cooper, George Floyd, personal things happening in our lives, at work, at home, wherever. Just a safe place where we could speak to somebody who lived a similar life. Um, and I think that, well, that's been huge for me in terms of coping. Um, what I would love to see is one day, and maybe it won't happen, maybe it will, I don't know. But I would love to see that conversation be free and open with people of any color, where I could call whoever and say, hey, look, this is what's been weighing me down, and we're supposed to be close, and I need to be able to let this out with somebody, anybody. But the challenge there is that is now bringing a burden onto somebody who has potentially never had to shoulder these types of burdens before. Does that mean that they shouldn't? No, no, maybe they should. Maybe we all should. Maybe we all shouldn't. I don't mean to put the burden on any specific people, but I think that what I try to recognize is, even outside of race, if I feel that somebody close to me is going through something, I try to be that shoulder to lean on. And I think that this is no different, but because it's such a difficult topic where most people don't have any answers, I think that it becomes even more of a burden for them. So I don't mean to suggest that we all need to go out there and weigh down everybody around us, and that's the only conversation we have all the time. But I think what I'm looking for is a time when I know that anybody around me could be an ear for me to say, I'm I'm down, or I'm upset, or I don't like the way I feel about this situation that we've just seen on the TV or on the news or what have you. And then I could feel that complete trust that it's a safe place for me to talk, where they're going to listen, they're going to empathize, maybe share advice if they have it, um, but not wag a finger and judge and explain to me why it probably isn't the case, and maybe I should do more research before I really worry about this, or before I believe that everything is about black and white. It's, yeah, I think that's what ultimately I'm looking for. But at present, my coping mechanism has been speaking to others, like I said, people who live a life just like me.
Yeah.
So this group of people who I've been speaking to is young-ish. I'd like to say I'm young-ish, professionals. A bunch of professional men who have families, who just have gone through some stuff recently and in the past, and just need to be able to share. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really good that you brought up that having that support network, and it
Mhm.
kind of ties with in our other conversation when it talked about unification in the community. Do you find that within the community could be better at supporting each other or understanding each other?
I think, well, I think just in general as men, I think all communities could probably be better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's only in recent times that the discussion of mental health awareness
Mm-hmm.
has improved, and I don't believe that even that is where it should be. I know little about it. I don't claim to be an expert, but I do know that over the years, there's always just been this feeling, this machismo, this like, oh, I don't need to talk about my feelings, I'm good, everything's fine, just leave me alone, you know and people didn't cope. They again just squash it, and it comes out somewhere. There's got to be an outlet somewhere. And maybe some people are able to direct it to be something positive, but
Mm-hmm.
some people can't, right? And so yeah, I think as a community, I think that we could be better, but I would think that that's probably the case of the community of men. I'll speak for us and say, and there are many who do it well. I'm not trying to say that nobody does it well, but I think and I'm going to use a strong generalization, which I don't like when people do, but I just think that in general, as men, I think we could do a better job of being um, open to discuss and share feelings and things like that. And to be quite honest, I didn't know that I needed it. I wouldn't have thought that I needed it, you know. Um, but like I said, in sort of stumbling into this group of friends and having these discussions, I recognized how much better I feel, even if it's 3, 4 in the morning, hanging up the phone and then realizing I got to get up at 6:30 or 7 to go to work. I felt better having done it
Mm-hmm.
than not. I didn't talk to them last week, and I missed it. I really missed it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm looking forward to talking to them
Yeah.
this weekend.
That's
Yeah.
really good that you have that support network. And I would imagine just years and years of experiencing discrimination, it has to play, so it has to play a part, or it has to affect you in how you see yourself too, how you value yourself as well.
Yeah. Yes. um, I have, so I'm fortunate, I think, that I was raised in such a way to understand my value um, early in life, like we've talked about before. And my dad, in particular, made it a point to continuously remind me that regardless of what you're told on the outside, this is what's actually true about you. You know, these are the qualities that you have. This is the ability and the talent that you have, and you're going to make it because of XYZ. Um, Now, I also know many people who didn't have that. I was fortunate to have that myself. That's a privilege. I'm coming in that space from a place of privilege. I had a father who was able to share that, or just a person in my life who was able to share that with me and prepare me and help me build that armor, intentionally helped me build that armor. So, regardless of what arrows were coming at me, it wasn't going to break me. But I do know people who didn't have that um, and don't have that.
Mhm.
And as a result, they have, I've seen um, self doubt, um, in some extreme cases, self loathing, um, just a poor sense of who they should be. Um, and when I say should be, I say that intentionally because I think that there's a large segment of the population that doesn't have to think about who they should be, they just are. Whereas there is a segment of the population who has taken it upon themselves to think about, okay, well, this is how I'm received in society, and when I do X, the response is Y, so I should be this in order to appease all of those around me. um, and I think that that can be, I mean, if that's who somebody wants to be, so be it. But at the same time, I think that it can be dangerous if it's not allowing you to be who you truly are. If you are changing yourself to appease others, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't think that that doesn't make sense to me. I'll say it that way. That doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
Um, However, I think that that's part of that armor. I think that's a coping mechanism that people will use to deflect some of those arrows so they don't have to live that way anymore. And I think it's a reflection of how they feel about themselves.
Mm-hmm. For people who are not um, minorities, what would you say is kind of the most practical thing? What action items would you recommend to do?
Ooh. So I've thought about this a lot. People have asked
Mhm.
me this many, many times, and
Mhm.
it's hard to come up with solid and concrete answers. I think that there are different organizations locally and all sorts in every city that have agendas of things that they would like to do to help their community. And I guess to an extent, it has to start within your own personal community, right? Um, I think that if you can repair before you can go clean up the rest of the world, you have to clean up your own backyard, right? And so I think that it has to start with your personal network and your own community. And so I keep going back to it, but I think it's really important. And in fact, I had a text earlier today, uh, a friend who, when this all started coming back to light, or I'll say coming to a light that they were able to recognize, because this isn't new, but coming to a light they were able to recognize, the response that I got from him was defensiveness. It was, hey, no, like, I'm not like that though, right? Like there's a lot of people out there who are really, they've got their own problems, but I'm nothing like them. So we're good. And I say, well, yeah, we're good. I mean, we are friends. We've been friends, and it doesn't take a tragedy elsewhere for me to highlight that we're friends. But I will point out that there have been numerous situations where I've pointed things out and you've said, well, yeah, that happens to me too. Or, when I was a kid, I shared a story about how when I was a kid, I was trying out, I wanted to play hockey. And I was on the team. I was going to say trying out. I wasn't trying out. We were little and they put you on a team, and the coach told my parents, you should just take him to go maybe play a sport where there are more people who look like him. And my dad was not, I mean, that was it. He said, okay, we're out, we're done. He's not playing ever again. We'll see you. Whereas my mom had an opposite response. She wanted me to stay and find a way to be the best one there, so I could basically rub it in their faces and say, see, you did need me after all. At the end of the day, I ended up leaving and not going back. We recognized that if the people who I'm going to have to trust as a little kid to watch over me don't believe that I should be there, it's probably not the safest environment for me. So anyway, so I shared that story, and I was told, oh yeah, that happened to me too. I wanted to play basketball, but I wasn't very good, so they told me to go home because they didn't think that there are a lot of white kids who should be playing basketball. And I said, okay, so first of all, there are lots of white people who play basketball. Okay, many, many, many. And there are black people who play hockey too, but I think it's very clear that, especially in the era I grew up in, it was few and far between. Second of all, you said very clearly, they told you not to play because you were not good. They told me not to play because there was nobody else who looked like me. And I think that when we had that conversation, instead of acknowledging that there was something going on in my life that you may not be aware of, you chose to squash it and minimize it and try to explain to me and educate me as to why it happens to everybody and I shouldn't be concerned about it at all. So that's sort of my long-winded way of saying that I think it starts on that individual basis. I think that if you know people who are, it might be a very quiet cry for help or way of reaching out, but if you know people who are coming to you and suggesting that I've got this situation and it's hurting me or it's bothering me or it's upsetting me, and your response is to give them narratives and give them stories of why it's not that big a deal, that's not, it's sort of, and this is touchy, but it's sort of like the whole concept of, and everybody's seen the memes by now, the Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Yes, obviously all lives matter. There's no question that all lives matter. Everybody understands that, but we didn't, it's the whole idea of, I saw one guy, he actually did it really well. I think he was a medical student or a doctor, and he did this little video and said, something along the lines of, oh, my leg is hurt, doctor, can you help me? And then the doctor says, oh, okay, well, what about your other leg? My leg's fine, doctor, this leg just got run over by a vehicle. Can you fix this? Well, yeah, I can't worry about that one leg. I need to worry about all of your legs and all of your body. I'm not really concerned about the fact that you're bleeding from this one leg. And it made me laugh when I saw that, because it was just a reflection of the fact that, like, this whole concept of all lives versus Black lives. Well, yes, it's obvious that all lives matter, but right now there is one group of lives that seem to be in danger, or at the very least are crying out for help. And I think that we need to be willing to recognize when there's a cry for help. And whether that's on a global level or on an individual level, I think you need to be willing to listen to your friend and neighbor who's crying for help.
I think that's definitely really good. How would you suggest that everybody to be more educated?
That's a very good question. Dialogue. I have a friend who, I don't remember if I've mentioned this to you before, but he is a police officer, and he reached out to me and said, look, I want to do this offline, but I have some people who I work with who are on the force who have explained to me that until they moved to our city, they had never even seen a Black person before, except for on TV. And so they have a lot of biases and thoughts based on what they've seen on TV. And they're starting to recognize that maybe those things aren't true. And I said, well, wait, they've gotten all the way into the police force before recognizing that these things may not be true, but okay, fine, go on. And he said, look, I'm not here to tell you that all is perfect, but I'm also not here to tell you that everybody inside our walls are looking to oppress and hold back Black people. But what I want to do is I want to have an open conversation with you. And so would you be willing to sit down with me? We'll have coffee and we'll talk about these issues so we can see on both sides what we can do to further, whatever cause or movement you're looking for. And I was mind blown. I could not believe that willingness to have that dialogue was there.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's what's needed. I think that there needs to be a willingness to reach out and say, okay, I think you are hurting. Why don't we talk about this? Because I don't know that you're going to get there on your own. So maybe we can talk together.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there needs to be a willingness to say, yeah, you're right. I am hurting. Let's talk. You know, I think it would have been very easy for me to brush it off and say, no, you don't understand what I'm going through. Forget it. But in the interest of, if there is an interest in actual healing and progress, I think there needs to be a willingness for there to be dialogue. I think that there needs to be multiple sides that are willing to listen, but I think that there needs to be a complete openness in this dialogue. Um, so I think that's what it comes down to is dialogue. I think it comes down to continued conversation. I hear all the time people say, "I don't want to talk about this anymore. It just weighs me down," and we've all seen it. It's all over the internet. Again, memes and pictures and whatnot. If you are tired of hearing about it, imagine how tired I am of living it, right? And people minimize it to jokes, but it makes it relatable. It's just true. It's just facts. If you are tired of talking about it all the time and, oh my gosh, it makes my day so hard because I have to listen to the fact that somebody's been oppressed and doesn't want to be oppressed anymore. I mean, how do you think that person feels to be living it every day of the week, right? So I think that to shut down the dialogue because you're tired, or not welcome or not invite the dialogue because you're tired, is grossly unfair. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, or you can do it, but don't claim to be willing to support the change because you
Mm-hmm.
are actively blocking change by not letting people communicate when they feel a need to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that willingness to have that continued dialogue is huge,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. I feel that maybe some people that are watching our conversation right now, they're probably thinking right now they're searching within their own network. Oh, okay, what can I do right now? Who can I reach out to? How would you
Mhm.
encourage them? What would you be kind of like, word of advice? Like, okay, you know what?
Hmm.
You're willing to, this is what I would suggest you to do.
I think trying to educate yourself, so a very good friend of mine from optometry school, by coincidence, actually had not used his phone at all the day that George Floyd died,
Mm-hmm.
until he picked up his phone to send me a text, purely coincidental. It was on the heels of the Amy Cooper incident. He sent me a text with a picture that he had just ordered the book White Fragility. And he said, I don't know when it's coming in, but it looks like it's selling out. And I don't know why it's selling out. And I said, have you not watched the news or gone online at all today? He says, no, I've been busy all day. I've had patients all day. And then he looked it up and he messaged me back. He said, buddy, I didn't mean to be so horribly insensitive. I just didn't know. I said, well, no, you're not insensitive to reach out to me on any day of the week. In fact, the fact that you're willing to educate yourself or to go and purchase a book of this sort is phenomenal. Now, I've not read the book. Okay. I will say very full transparency. I have not read the book. I'm interested, but I have not read that book. But he now has, and I have a number of friends who have, for the sake of educating themselves, just because of their acquaintances and friendships like me. Um, and that in any situation, I mean, especially as professionals, we got to this position of professionalism by educating ourselves. And those of us in our field have educated ourselves to the highest degree in one specific area, and generally wouldn't feel comfortable speaking about it until we were educated. Now, I think that this is similar in that there are resources and opportunities to educate ourselves, whether it's books or, we live in the right era today where if you type in, what does it mean to be anti-racist, you could read for years, like there are publications, there are speeches and conversations and people doing what we're doing, and it's out there. You just have to be willing to look. I think that what you are doing is fantastic, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, because I think this is one of those tools that people can use. to help educate. Like that, if somebody is listening to this already, then I think they've already got a leg up in that they're obviously willing to hear it and they're looking for answers. And so they're already on that right track. There are so many other fantastic podcasts. I think there's always a fear of, well, what if I try to speak to somebody and they shut me down?
Right.
It might happen. You know, like that's just life. Like it's I don't mean to be harsh, but that happens in all aspects of life. Does that mean that you don't try any further or don't try anymore? Well, no. If you believe in the cause and you believe that there's something that you can do better to help your community and society as a whole, well, then you keep trying. But it takes a level of internal strength to admit that you maybe haven't had to deal with something, and somebody else has, and you don't know something when you generally are intelligent and know answers. You don't know something, and somebody else might, but you don't know how to approach it because it's a touchy subject. It's a really challenging, you know, it's challenging to navigate that. So I think that educating yourself with resources that are available, again, whether it's books or online or conversations with people who are willing, are a good first step, at least, right?
That's really good. Well, that actually concludes our conversation for today. So thank you everyone for joining us. And we also encourage you to have your own intentional conversations too.